Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show. Hi, I'm Paul, and we come live to you every Tuesday at 8 p.m. talking about all of the big topics in rugby. And joining me this evening to talk about that kind of stuff. First up, I've got Boa. How you doing, sir?
Very well. Great day to be a Kiwi for more reasons than one. Very elegant New Zealand bred horse winning the Melbourne Cup. And, hey, if you did back my tip, congratulations. Drinks on you. And you look, lots happening.
Hey, I don't think you actually made that. I think whilst you put that tip in our live our rugby chat group, you didn't put that tip in the out for the public. I don't think so. Via any of your shows. So yes, I don't think anyone else would go. Whilst Stephen Harris took your tip. Evening, sir. How you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Paul. Always a privilege and a pleasure to be on the TDM and talk about the 15-man game, or the 23-man game, we should call it. But gotta say, I jumped all over that tip from Boa because I've got a bit of a hot streak this year. So when you've got that hot streak, you've got to go with that feel or that gut instinct. But I'm pretty sure if he had the opportunity to put it out there in the public, I think a lot of people actually did jump on it, though, Paul, just listening to a few people around the traps and on the social network.
Yes, it's as you say, it was a even me in my hungover state and sleeping most of the afternoon have noticed that a Kiwi horse won the race. Yes, folks, I've had a bit of a big day yesterday because Kia Play, my new trying to start up a e-commerce business, and we sold our very first stables last night, and hence we had a few beers, and I was worse for wear today because of that. But that doesn't stop me getting back on the beers. So yes, Spates gold medal ale for me this evening. So I'll just crack that one open.
I'm on the line red. I'm probably going to order a couple of crates after today's win. So yeah.
I'm getting to Boa every time we have the show. I'm getting to like Boa a lot more, and at the moment he gets the thumbs up from me. Lion Red, sponsor of the Northern Taniwha for many years, even though it looked odd, the red label on the back of a Cambridge Blue jersey.
There we go. So on the show this evening, I say I've kind of been somewhat distracted the last couple of days, but some of the stuff we will talk about. Obviously, we've got the All Blacks test at the weekend. We've also had the Black Ferns having their opening test of their November European tour as well. We've also coming towards the close of the pointy end of the Bunnings NPC. So that is those are the topics that I can think about. But folks in the live chat, because you can always come join us in the live chat in Facebook and YouTube. Any other topics you would like us to discuss, then do please put them in there. And also, boys, obviously, if you have any topics you want to have a chat about as well, we can talk about those. But first, kicking us off then, the All Blacks against Wales, or in Cardiff against Wales, put up a cracking victory, racking up over 50 points. Boa, what did you think of the All Blacks' performance?
Oh, fantastic! I think it was a very level-headed performance. By that I mean they're very clinical and strategic by absorbing pressure. Probably the first two quarters, more so that first quarter. Wales, to their credit, they really brought the game in that first 20. They were very physical, some big tackles. And, the All Blacks, they didn't lose their shape. They didn't try to overdo things. There's a couple of opportunities where they took the 3 points. And at the same time, they stuck to a game plan, which to me showed a lot of maturity. And of course, last week we did mention what sort of lineup we were going to expect. And we put out the strongest possible lineup. And of course, some of the real positives were the physicality the guys showed in the ruck department, and that clearly showed that they'd learned from that last Springbok test loss. They were quite strong and steady. It was good, quick lightning ball. And once the Welsh started to tire, that's when they really put the foot down. And in a matter of 10 or so minutes, they completely blitzed and obliterated the Welsh, which is nothing short of Harlem Globetrotter basketball style rugby. And boy, when you actually look into some of those movements and when you dissect it in slow motion, they were actually very basic tactics and very basic movements. But the All Blacks did it at such good professional intensity. It looked mesmerizing. So all in all, I think a good solid 8 out of 10 performance. And also some of the leaders in the team really stood up, particularly Samuel Whitelock and Adi Surveyor doing some fantastic work in the ball carrying department and the breakdown. So for me, a very, very satisfying win. And we did tip anywhere between 50 to 60 points, and that's exactly what happened.
Stephen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I've got to say, Paul, I think Bob summed it up really, really well. Credit to the Welsh in the first half, and listen, credit to the way they were actually moving the ball, because I thought at times their attack was actually quite fluent, but the All Blacks were just a little bit more accurate on the tackle, and also you've got to say, losing Alan Wynne-Jones, losing that leadership, their line out went wonky, and despite a couple of individuals, two of their loose forwards playing very, very well, they're 8 and they're 7. You've got to say the likes of Blackadder, Savia, and Papa Ali especially. Wow, when you're sort of looking at a team performance, you're always looking for maybe a half a dozen 7 players. Well, that loose forward trio would probably easily fit in nicely as players of the day in the first 6 players or so. Of course, Beauden Barrett with a pretty amazing performance. When he does great things, boy, he's really great. Wasn't perfect by any stretch. I thought a couple of times, a couple of little unlike errors from him in terms of his kicking. One I can recall where he kicked and there was probably nothing on. But listen, in the main, a good performance. But I've got to say, it was expected with Wales missing so many bods, either through injury or part of the Gallagher Premiership.
Yep, no, very true. We think it was a foregone. Yeah, I think not a foregone conclusion, but yeah, the All Blacks went in as very heavy favourites, even more so than they would do normally. As Bo said there, though, it was that is what we think now is who Ian Foster thinks is his best side of fit players. So clearly, a couple of players. Fit and on tour players. I mean, obviously, 3 players spring to mind that aren't there in Jack Goodhue, Sam Cane, and Aaron Smith. Those 3. But apart from those 3, that is effectively the first choice team. Oh, and perhaps Scott Barrett as a bench player. But I think that's what we think he is his. What he considers to be the strongest side. Aaron puts in there, my doubts still remain about Havili. And yes, he had a quiet game, and we'll have to see. And I think that the centre combination is probably one of the and the loose trio are the 2 areas that are most up in the air at the moment with that. But but I think with 2 players in there who did play against the USA, and I thought the USA game was supposed to be was a totally second string team, so I wasn't expecting anybody there to back up unless they were coming back into the side in the way that sort of Richard Moana, Sam Whitelock were. But 2 players did. First up, the Blackadder in the number 6 jersey. Has he now has he overtaken Adi? Not Adi. Has he overtaken Akira Ioane now? And is he the first choice 6 for the All Blacks boys?
I think it's very much going to be horses for courses against teams who play a very traditional sort of upfront, physical, old school test. No question. Blackadder is your first choice 6. Love his work rate, and he just wants to get in people's faces and really, get those positive carry meters. I think a very good replacement, given that we've had Liam Squire with an early retirement. So he's that mold of player, very abrasive. It's what I call a sandpaper. He's just willing to get stuck into it. Akira, with certain opposition, once we start really wanting to play that expensive game from the very get-go, he's probably a starting choice. But I think more likely against the top 4 sides we will start seeing Blackadder. And of course, the other real positive for me was Will Jordan. I mean, he's really fallen in line with what.
Wait! I've just asked you. I've just asked you about Blackadder. I'll ask you about Will Jordan later. But we've got to get some.
Okay, we'll back up the bus. So Blackadder, I would say, 60 to 70% of the time he'll be starting, no question. I guess particularly against most wanted opponent, the Springboks, he's going to start. But against the sides where we're going to play a very expansive game, it's going to be Akira Ioane. But it'll be good to see this competition because week to week we might see some changes because all it takes is one barnstorming performance from Akira, and then he's back in favor. So this is great to see. Good, healthy competition. But I have to say, love the way Blackadder, puts his head down and just gets stuck into it, which is probably what we've been missing in our loose forward trio.
So in Nocturnal Rights also in the live chat brings up Frizzell as well, who's coming back. But Stephen, you're not convinced by that one. Because one of the problems we've had for the All Blacks since Jerome Kano has retired is from international rugby is who is that six? So are you think we're going horses and courses with Boa, or do you think Blackadder is the replacement?
I think I in the main I pretty much agree with everything Boa said. But one thing I will say, unfortunately for Frizzell, obviously his off-field infraction and maybe not just quite nailing those opportunities that he's had, and he's left the door open for not only Akira Ioane but also Ethan Blackadder. So he probably finds himself dropping down the order at this point in time. Paul, I just have to mention this because I think it's important that we mention it. One player that was stung by a lot of criticism in that game against the USA because everybody was saying, well, mate, is he trying to play for the Harlem Globetrotters, etc. And I actually thought he was making a little bit of an angry statement in the game was TJ Perenara. There was sometimes I was wondering what was he on at the time, and I just wonder if he was responding to criticism that he'd received over his performance.
Interestingly, that one. There was definitely comments in that I saw that TJ was perhaps not focusing on the game enough initially in this one. Was getting carried away with some of the back chat and off the ball stuff in this one, unfortunately. Interesting one there. Good call. Because I think a lot of us thought Weber would be picked ahead of him, and that TJ wasn't the number one anymore. But looks like or number two, sorry, behind Aaron Smith. But it looks like he has done that one. But the other name then, and I'm going to hold Boa back even further. Stephen, I'll let you go first with Will Jordan. Has Will Jordan claimed the 14 jersey? Or are we still going to see some changing in that back three as we try and settle it down as to what is the first choice?
For me, I think with Will Jordan, what we forget, this guy's 23 years old. And I think it's taken him a while to settle in to Test match rugby. We know his ability, and that try would have given him a ton of confidence. I like Will Jordan and, of course, Rico Ioane on the wing. I want them to personally. I want them to stay in those positions, and I like the fact that you can basically have an X factor outside back come off the bench, whether it's a Sevu Reece or anybody else. I think he's cracked that position, and he does. He's got the whole complete skill set under the high ball. Got the pace. He looked a little bit rattled against the Springboks, and to be fair, that's the first time he played against the Springboks, and I think he'll now totally understand what he's up against next time he plays them.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously got pulled off and then dropped for the following game against the Springboks, which I think a lot of us thought that he slipped down the order, but has worked his way back in again. Boa, well, you've started already, but yeah, you were very impressed by him at the weekend.
Will Jordan. So the one key adjustment which he has made in his game, in falling in line with this whole game plan, is his adjustment of depth in the kick receive. So against the Boks, he was actually sort of moving forward a bit more than what the All Blacks would have liked him to, and that's where we were creating pressure on ourselves, and there was a lot of high balls coming back into Jordie Barrett. So Jordie had to actually get out of position and contest the high ball, whereas Will Jordan was slightly ahead of where he should have been. But against the Welsh, he made that adjustment and he hung right back on his running line off the ball, and that gave plenty of space for the fullback and his other winger to hold their position. And the best example I can give you is, I'm just going to put my coach's hat on here. There was a ruck where the Welsh recycled, and of course the Northern Hemisphere teams love to use this technique called the caterpillar ruck, where they actually have about 3 players tagging on to each other in single file, and the ball comes right to the foot of the last player. And when the referee says use it, after about 20 seconds, the halfback decides to hoist it up in there for a box kick. Now, Will Jordan made the adjustment, and for Wales's misfortune, they kicked right into his hands. This gave him plenty of time to actually assess and scan what was in front of him, puts the chip and chase. Beautiful bit of finishing. And this is the type of adjustment I think we expect to see from these quality players. And that would have definitely pleased Ian Foster. And in my word, I think Will Jordan pretty much cemented, and it showed for a guy who's 23 years old, he can adjust under these conditions. And, you know, he would have learned plenty from it. And long may it continue, and he will just continue to score probably a couple of tries each coming up. So if anyone's watching, looking for a try scorer, Will Air Jordan.
Well, yes, he's scoring at more than the try game so far. So yeah, it's I don't think you'll get very good odds on Jordan scoring tries for that one. So just something that's been going on in the live chat is Nocturnal Rights says that he's backing Frizzell, as we've said, and he said Stephen Harris $5 on Frizzell being ahead of Blackadder by July next year. Now, Stephen Harris then put in our private chat that yes, it's Nocturnal Rights, yes, he will do. So it's Nocturnal Rights won't have seen that because it was in the private chat. But Nocturnal, Stephen is taking you up on that $5. So yes, so July next year, we'll see. Is Frizzell ahead of Blackadder or vice versa? There's $5 on it. Now, if Stephen keeps following Boa's gambling tips, that's not going to be much. That's not going to be a problem for him anyway.
Investment, not the term you're looking for is investment. Now, one thing I have to say for Nocturnal is, and everyone listening out there, what Blackadder brings to the table is he's a very, very good line-out option as well. And his work rate in the line-out is exceptional. He's, in fact, been flawless. I don't think he's missed a single line-out throw, particularly at the front of it. So I think that level of versatility gives him a slight edge. And, of course, Frizzell at the moment, you know, he's got a bit of catching up to do. So I think it's a safe bet to say Blackadder, as it is, the form line is looking good. And Mr. Harris, I think that $5 is safe.
money in the bank.
Nocturnal Rights thinks, Peter Manger Jensen might come back in next year. Look, he's having a great time at Bunnings NPC, but that's hardly all black level. And you remember Jack Goodhue is also coming back as well. So anything else from the weekend for the All Blacks boys, or shall we look forward?
Oh, I think for me, a case of looking forward. Listen, it was great to see. Obviously, in Wales, there was a lot of talk about the Welsh being underdone, but let's not forget the Welsh Rugby Union accepted this game. They know that the All Blacks are a draw card. They're going to, you know what, $6 million in the bank that they didn't have before that game. It would have been $6 million they didn't have if they didn't have that game. And listen, it was great to see so many people head into the stadium and just to get out. And you know, in terms of what they've gone through in Britain in and around COVID, I just think it was great to see. As for our mate Arvo, is it Arvo who basically sneaked in? Jarvo. You know, for me, quite frankly, it's a little bit like the joke that the joke that you tell once and you try and say it again 3 times on the same night. I think people are a little bit over it. Really disappointed with the security. I mean to say he just practically ran past a guy who wasn't basically looking, and to me that's disappointing. This is not his moment in the sun. This is basically for the players, and it's great theatre, you know, and tradition as well. It's not his time in the sun, but unfortunately it's made it his time in the sun.
Yep. On the Welsh side of things, yeah, Johnny McNichol had a good game at fullback, and also Tyburn, the Welsh number 7 as well, also had a good game. Another a young guy who has got a good future ahead of him if he can keep up that kind of form. Look, there was some comments around the refereeing in this game. And yeah, so some of the calls were interesting, I think, to say the very least. And I do think that Wales probably got the worst of it, but at the end of the day, it didn't change the result. But yeah, some interesting ones in there. The yellow card. Look, it was a shoulder. And there were no arms in it, so yes, I've got no complaints with that yellow card. It's nothing to do with the height, just the fact that there were no shoulders, no arms in it. The problem is there were a whole bunch of other tackles during the game on both sides where there weren't arms that didn't get called. So it's a shame that there wasn't the consistency and some interesting calls by the referee as well in there, but thankfully didn't change the result on this one. Looking forward to next weekend then, and it's Italy. Boa, 17 changes back to the side that faced USA.
Yeah, probably. I think there'll be a bit of mixing and matching as well, because there were a couple of form lines there. Foster and Cole would have thought, look, I think we need to probably get these guys a bit more time. Look, let's face facts. I don't think Italy's. I know Adi Surveyor made a statement early in the week saying, last time they played each other, the back three carved them up. Well, I beg to differ. I think that's very gracious of Adi. He's showing the host a bit of respect, but I think we know what's coming. It's going to be a big score, and I think the All Blacks will just ramp up the intensity. They'll be ruthless. They will want to continue this form line. They will want to make sure that they have a near perfect game and look to finish, pretty much every opportunity. And of course, Italy haven't really played much rugby together, and they're coming just, it's pretty much a fresh up campaign, so to speak. So I think it's a foregone conclusion. What the result is, it's just going to be how much, and it will really depend on the error rate. If the All Blacks don't be clinical, we're not going to see a big enough score. If they are clinical, boy, I think we're in for a big, big score. A lot of entertainment. Look, it's I don't want to sound unrealistic by saying that there's going to be some competition this weekend. There isn't. I think Italy are just going to absolutely pumped, and I'm expecting 70 plus.
Stephen, you're both saying mix and match. I'm saying total change back to the USA side. Where do you think the selection will go?
Well, I suspect one guy who won't be in selection is in this a little bit. We haven't heard a lot about his injury. It's Brody Retallick carrying a shoulder injury. I think he'll definitely be given a week off just to make sure he recovers well enough. I think they'll probably want to protect their top team as much as they can, because those last two games against Ireland and France are pretty much going to be back-to-back games, which will be very tough games. They're the really big games of the tour, in fact, for the rest of the year. So my thoughts are not too dissimilar to yours, Paul. Probably a bit of mix and match. I can't say I'll be keen to see how the progression of some of the younger guys that they've taken on this tour go.
Yeah, I'd like to see I and Lord both start, and then Sam Whitelock come off the bench in that one. But there has been talk of Sam Whitelock starting every game, or because he's captain. I'm not sure that's such a great idea. But and not to say, I think the players are serious when they state the opposition is to be respected, no matter their quality, because of the chance of losing, however remote, will sting for the rest of their lives. Look, and also, if you are complacent going into a game, it can cause you problems. Arrogance also is not a very good look. Let's be blunt. And so it's much. Whilst we know that they will be, and I think Boa's right. It's going to be somewhere between the world score and the USA score. It's not going to be 100 plus, but it's definitely going to be more than 50. So yeah, it's in that 70 to 80 range is what I'm expecting from the All Blacks. The other game last weekend was Scotland beating Tonga 60-14. Unfortunately, and if we just quickly run through the games, then this weekend Italy versus New Zealand is at 2 a.m. on Saturday. 2 a.m. on Sunday morning. Jeez, everyone gets up early on Saturday and blames me. At 2 a.m. Sunday morning. At the same time, we've also got Ireland versus Japan. Obviously, so that will be an interesting one to see how Japan is tracking. Obviously, after that they lost to the Wallabies. They've had a warm up coming into this, which Ireland won't have had. There's also Portugal versus Canada at 4 a.m. That's not on Sky. The other ones are. And Spain versus Fiji at 4 a.m. So a good start to Fiji for their tour. Now remember, Fiji have not got their coaches there or any of their Southern Hemisphere based players. It's purely European based players plus some European based coaches that are doing that. So no Vern Cotter, for example, but he is getting in touch via Skype. Again, that one's not on Sky. At 4:15 though, on Sky is England versus Tonga. Which I think we can, after Tonga's result against Scotland, I think we know what's going to happen, something similar again. And then into the kind of meteor ones, 6:30 a.m. Wales versus South Africa. Obviously, South Africa will go in as heavy favourites on that one, but Wales will have some reinforcements in there. But we do worry that they'll have lost players like Alwyn Jones to injury. And then finally, France. And then the final on the Sunday. France versus Argentina at 9 a.m. New Zealand time. So that should be a good one. And then on Monday, you've got Scotland versus Australia at 3:15 a.m. As well. So another cracking game there. It'll be interesting to see how the Wallabies go, because let's be honest, their form when not playing the All Blacks is fantastic currently. Can Scotland, having had that warm-up against Tonga, will they be in a position where they can upset that Wallaby apple cart? We'll just have to wait and see. Any particular comments on any of those games that you want to sort of call out?
Yeah, that Scotland Australia game. Just looking at the TAB odds for that game, Australia paying $1.58. Scotland paying $2.27. Now that could be a really, really interesting game. Scotland obviously would have taken a lot out of that victory over Tonga. Nevertheless, the Tongans weren't at full strength, and I realise they're adding a few players to their roster this weekend. I see Solomon Kata might be available for Tonga this weekend, so he'll be a handful in the middle. But listen, I think England will be way too strong. Well, South Africa, once again, that'll be an interesting one. I think you hit it on the head. Alwyn Jones, real big loss there, and of course Argentina versus France. Well, you never know with France. Sometimes that's a game that I would never look at betting on, because you just don't know what you're going to get.
But 9 a.m. in the morning, it's a good one to watch over breakfast. Bo, any particular games there that jump out that you want to talk about? Or
yeah, the Wallabies being hosted by the United Nations of Scotland. I think that's going to be a very, very interesting game. For more reasons than one. I'll tell you why. Because Scotland's form line coming into this, they obviously, took apart Tonga, and that was to be expected. And I have to say this again, I feel really sorry for Tonga, because 2 weeks in a row now they'll be punching bag, and they seem to, with a big smile they front up. And I have nothing but admiration, love, and respect for our brothers from the South Pacific, because you think about it, every week you're going to get your teeth punched in, but you happily do it. You front up and do it. And that takes a lot of guts in my book. Anyway, moving on to yes, Steve.
I was just quickly going to say on that too, 11 players born outside Scotland as well. I just thought I'd throw that in.
The United Nations of Scotland.
Yeah.
Ironically, Glasgow are hosting the World Climate Change Summit, where all the literally all the United Nations have flown in with their private charter jets and all these commercial carriers. I thought I'd throw that in as well, a bit of hypocrisy. But anyway, coming back to the game. Now, keep in mind, there's been a bit of turbulence as far as the build-up from the Wallabies, because it's been well documented, and this is a classic case as to why you need to pick home-based players. As soon as you start, deregulating the whole centralized contract, club versus country comes in, and then in comes the opinions and all the internet keyboard warriors, and it's just a mess. So the preparation hasn't been ideal. So I think this is going to be a very, very close game. And looking at the balance of probabilities, looking at the history of when the Wallabies have actually toured the Northern Hemisphere, I would very much like to tip the United Nations of Scotland. It'll be a close game. It'll be less than one score, but I think there's a very, very strong case to be made here. And looking at some of the playing patterns Coach McGregor has come up with, there's some really positive signs there, and he has some class finishers. So yeah, I think it's going to be close, but I would love to see Dave Rennie and his Wallabies actually keep the momentum going. It'll be great build-up, but a little birdie on the wire called Mr. Statspert tells me that we will see Scotland just pipping the Wallabies.
There we go. Well, the Nocturnal says, will Rennie chance Patire at fullback? I wouldn't think so. But then again, with England and Wales coming up as their next two games, it's they don't have any easy ones to try out these sort of things. So who knows if he will or not. Nocturnal writes, are there any potato farmers in the borders, a la John Jeffries, to pick for Scotland? Well, look, I think the days of farmers playing rugby at international level have long gone, I'm afraid. But I did talk to Matt Fadders the other day, and I asked him, are we going to see him in a Super Rugby team early next year? And he said no, very unlikely. The cows on the farm are going to need attention. So it looks like Matt Fadders will be doing some farming. It's also where we see Marty McKenzie nowadays as well, that he skipped one NPC season. He's back this year with Southland, but he skipped it because he was on the farm there and enjoying life on the farm. So a few of our southern players from the South Island definitely and are farmers in the NPC or trainee farmers on that point of view. And well, actually, maybe not even trainee. I don't know how expert Matt Fadders is as a cow farmer, to be honest. One of the points I would also make around this, to add some balance to this United Nations stuff that we're getting here from my colleagues, is that quite a few of the Scottish players might be, when they say born overseas, they can be born in England, would be counted as being born outside of Scotland. So there are some of those players who are through parentage and whose parents just happen to be working down south when they were born. So it's not all kilted Kiwis or kilted Springboks. Actually, you get more kilted Springboks nowadays than kilted Kiwis, don't you? To be honest. Anyway, on that one. Moving on then to the women's game, and we had two games at the weekend. The USA took on Canada and lost 9-15, and the Black Ferns played England, losing 43-12. Wow. I'll be honest, I didn't see a scoreline like that coming, but it has been 2 years since the Black Ferns have played international rugby. They did play against the New Zealand Barbarians last year. And there are a number of quite a few, because it's been 2 years, there's quite a few debutantes in this one. But I'll be honest, I've not seen the game. Boys, have you had a chance to watch it?
Yes, I have, Paul. Let's first of all, comprehensive performance from England. What it pretty much showed is they've played 14 tests, actual tests, in the last couple of years, Paul, and it showed. And of course, a lot of their girls part of academies in and around premiership teams. Of course, they play in their own competition. And listen, it showed. It just basically too powerful, too quick at the end of the day, and they exposed a New Zealand team that had a lot of newbies in. But ironically, it was probably the senior players in the Black Ferns lineup that really, really disappointed. Probably the poorest test I've ever seen from Kendra Coxedge on the weekend. Chelsea Alley, Flula, but you've got to say that they were pretty much dominated by their opposites. But one of the reasons they were dominated by the opposites, they were dominated up front, despite a little bit of a comeback in the second half. But you've got to give plaudits to England defensively, very, very good in the second half, even though the Black Ferns threatened to bounce back in this game.
Did the Black Ferns have a warm-up game? They had some kind of game of sort of three halves, or kind of, or a training run out, not a full-on game. But yes, they had Wales and England under 20s or something, I think it was, to warm up with against last weekend. So yes, they did have some warm-up there. Boa, your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, look, I watched large parts of the game, including the highlights, and look, we got beaten by a very, very efficient, very professional, polished performance. So you got to give it to the English ladies. They just absolutely obliterated us. But at the same time, we've got to give some balance to this. As my colleague Mr. Harris said, the Black Ferns are playing a proper test match first up. And first up, when you get one of these sides, this is what happens. If you have a soft preparation or hardly any preparation, you will struggle, and struggle they did. And of course, whenever Kendra Coxedge, who I actually rate as one of the best players in rugby union, both in male and female, if she has a quiet game, the rest of the team suffers, and that's exactly what happened. And I think was it 8 or 9 debutants for the Black Ferns?
Yeah, 9.
So we've got to factor that in. And one thing I have to say is, thank the Lord that the Women's Rugby World Cup was delayed by 1 year, because given how the entire preparation had sort of come in and we had this stop-start nature, it would have been an absolute disaster. So I think the girls would have learned a lot from this, and we can't be too harsh and too critical, because this whole test was kind of under the radar. They just sort of came half under that. And the most important thing I think the rugby administrators need to learn is that first up in a campaign, when you play a quality side, you probably have to look at a slightly different preparation on who your personnel are, and are you actually going to blood 9 debutants against a quality side. And the Roses 100% deserved it, and sometimes you just got to sit back and admire, because they played some fantastic rugby and we were well beaten. I'm surprised it was only 43. It could have easily been 60, maybe 65. And the Ferns, they'll be hurting. They'll have to lick their own wounds, and let's see what they can come back with.
Now, someone here says that the USA-Canada game was streamed on Facebook by World Rugby, so fantastic to have that that accessible. And also, that's part of the Pacific 4 competition that Australia and New Zealand will be joining next year. So this is New Zealand and sorry, not New Zealand. This is USA and Canada starting that and getting that going. This coming weekend, then, the USA women and Canada will reverse their game. So it was not reverse. They'll have another game between them. France will be hosting South Africa. I expect that one to be a comfortable French win, to be honest. England and the Black Ferns play again. That game is at 3:45 a.m. on Monday, folks, on Sky. Also on Sky will be Wales women versus Japanese women on Monday at 6 a.m. Look, 4 test matches in the women's game this coming weekend. It's good to see the growth in that, and that we're starting to see more rugby. Still a long way to go. On the Super Rugby Alpaki, am I pronouncing that right? We've had a couple of signings. Sarah Harini has signed for the Hurricanes today. So congratulations on her. Was it Stacey Fuller? I think also we saw had signed for the Chiefs as well. So we're starting to see those announcements come out, which is great to see. On those. Sorry, no.
Ruby Tui.
Thank you. I was just actually pulling it. I just saw my email that I got there from the Chiefs media saying yes, Ruby Tui signed for the Chiefs. Sorry, folks. So good to see these announcements starting to happen, which starts to give it a bit of a buzz around that side of things, Stephen.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, you mentioned these two young ladies because there'd probably be a couple that would probably be part of the 15s if a Rugby World Cup was playing in New Zealand. I know sevens is more their gig these days, but Sarah Hiddity, we know, was a big part of the Black Ferns when they picked up the World Cup in Ireland. At the in their last crack at it, so they have missed some talents. I just wanted to mention that second test is at Franklin Gardens on Monday morning, but I'd like to see some changes at hooker. Their line-out wasn't the best, and I think Crystal Murray just offers some physicality when she came on. Even the English girls found her a bit of a handful, but when you're not getting your set piece right, you're not, as Les Elder pretty much said or summed up after the game, you're just not getting any ball. And of course, I'm not sure what the status with Portia Woodman is at the minute, but you've got to at least match some of that pace on the English outside. Sorry to back the truck up a little bit there, Paul.
No, that's fine. Actually, and you're talking about Les Elder there. She's also signed for the Chiefs, and the All Blacks captain, unsurprisingly, who was based out of Bay of Plenty, was the Chiefs captain for their exhibition game, and she is. So I think it's been announced. Ruby Tui kind of said, "Oh, I'll be good to be around Les Elder." So she looks like she's signed for the Chiefs, even though it's not been. As I say, I've not seen an announcement for it. I think Ruby Tui was the first player to be announced as officially signing on that one. But I think there's a certain element of assumption that for the Chiefs and the Blues, the players that were selected, and that a lot of those players, or these are Black Ferns in those teams that played in that exhibition game, will be in those teams again. Whereas, because the Blues kind of mentioned our players who have been selected for the Black Ferns. So yes, it'll be interesting for that one. Boa, any sort of comments on any of those games or anything else before we move on the men's side of things?
Yeah, just a couple of things with the Black Ferns where they actually won and lost the game was up front. You got to show some physicality, and the ruck clean out needs to. It was pretty much like what happened to the All Blacks against Springboks, but the difference with the Roses were, they were clinical. They had the gas and wheels out wide, and of course, one-on-one tackles. Our defense was just way too passive, just kind of chest surfing, not kind of making committed tackles. So that needs to change. And of course, with players like Coxedge, you got to get the kicking game, the tactical kicking game, so you don't put pressure on yourself and you're playing in the right part of the field. So I think the Black Ferns will turn this around very, very quickly. They will learn very quickly from it. And there's nothing to say that, they can't sort of have an immediate reversal of their fortunes. But one thing I do have to stress is, particularly fresh up on a campaign, when you are playing a quality side like the Roses, you need your best players on hand, and you have to prepare in a certain way so that they're ready to fire. Otherwise, if you turn up and you don't have your best players, you're just going to get a hiding. That's exactly what happened.
But let's be clear. I mean, the Roses didn't have a warm-up game for this either. This was them. This was their first hit out. So it's the same for both sides from that point of view. Yes, they've had the Premier. They have they've had more games in recent times, but their last game would have been back in the first half of this year during the Women's Six Nations. And they've been playing their club competition, which is the Premier 15s as well. But this is it's not like they've had 2 or 3 games to warm up and come into this game either. On that note,
I was going to say, Paul, I think what they have got, though, they've still got a lot of experience, and I reckon they would have bottled what happened in that last World Cup final as well. And it would have been front and foremost on their mind. So I think in terms of motivation, I don't think that would have been too much of an issue for the English girls. But you make a fair point. They didn't have a hit out, and you've got to give them a bit of credit for that.
Now, before this, you mentioned that Alice Soper has been saying some things. I've written an article in the press, and I've not had a chance to read it. But the title is "Women's Rugby must become unashamedly ambitious if it is to flourish." Steve, did you have some things you wanted to say about that, or what she said? I mean, or can you give some what she kind of said?
Yeah, listen, for me, I think there's a time and a place. I think we all knew that this Black Ferns team was going in underdone. I mean, so I pretty much tweeted out, even when they took the players, there was a lot of talk that they'd taken some of these players out of the Farah Palmer Cup because you still needed them playing hardened rugby. How good would it have been? There's a majority of these girls play for both Waikato and Canterbury to have actually been playing in that final, just to give them, keep that edge there, if you know what I mean. So for me, I just think there's a time and a place to make that sort of comments. I realise she's an activist for women's rugby, and listen, I totally get that, but I just think, like I say, I don't know if those girls in Britain, if that's something they want to read right now, that the excuses are already being rolled out, if you know what I mean. I think these girls need to go away, and basically try and put out a performance that they can actually be proud of, because if that's what basically happens, well, then you've sort of got to look at maybe your own individual preparation before this game.
Yep. Again, I'd say I've not read it, so I don't know what she said. So I can't comment on what's been said there. But anything else, or should we move on to some Moana Pasifika stuff?
There is Player of the Week from last weekend. Obviously, Will Jordan's, that sensational effort, and of course the English debutante, I think it was Holly Atchison.
Yes,
she's got jet shoes, that girl. Man, she got the ball, beautiful pass, cut right through. I think beat 4 would-be tacklers. Amazing try. That this lady, she's got some wheels on her, and straight out of a highlight reel. So great try, and in my book, I would rate that as equally as good at what Mr. Will Air Jordan did. So congratulations, Holly. And I think that would be a name we will see more and more in the World Rugby circuit, particularly with this very formidable English Roses side.
Right then, something I have seen, and Simon says, and this is one to take from the live chat. He says, I saw an interesting interview on MacP, the chairwoman of the other Super Rugby bid. So he's talking there about the Kahlua, or whatever it is, out of and Kahlua is actually an alcoholic drink, so that's not the right word. But anyway, the team out of Hawaii. Just to continue what he says, time in giving out about Moana Pasifika getting to the Super Rugby license. Now, first up, the interview that's being shared around is from some time ago. It is not a current one, because the radio DJ mentions the fact that Moana Pasifika is still actually, it's not possible that the Hawaiian team is still actually bidding for Major League Rugby. Now that's about a year ago, I think now, or more, that fell through. So look, it's an old interview. She makes claims along the lines that they were going to be paying players $1 million a year. Now, I would take everything in this interview with a pinch of salt, to be honest with you folks. They came out and made announcements, basically came out with a name and a logo, and made a whole bunch of announcements. We found out that another company told them to stop using the logo because they basically copied it from somebody and had stolen the logo. They hadn't had their own logo made. Then they also made they had the backing of the Hawaiian government, the Hawaiian University, the Hawaiian Airline, and the Hawaiian Tourism Association, all 4 of whom came out and said they didn't have any connection with the rugby team. So, look, Simon says I sense a very grifter vibe about them. Look, they're not from where I'm sitting, from what I've seen, they are not a proper organization. They applied for an MLR franchise. They knew they were going to get declined, and the day before they came out swinging, saying that Major League Rugby was financially unviable, was going to collapse. Well, we've not seen that yet, folks, have we? They came out swinging when they didn't get their Super Rugby franchise as well. So, to my mind, look, they're not a credible organisation, and I would say, take anything that you hear from them with a heavy sense of scepticism.
Yeah, you did right, Paul. And in fact, it was, I think, last year, around about July last year, they were actually threatened with litigation from MRL, because basically they went into Hawaii and pretty much said they basically had a license to start a team there. Now, the state senator at the time, Glenn Waikai, pretty much told the local Hawaii news over there that nobody had heard of them. Tourism Hawaii, who they reckon they'd been dealing with, hadn't heard of them. Basically, Aloha Stadium, which would have been the home ground of this particular team, Kanaloa, Hawaii, nobody had heard of them. And yeah, a lot of mistruths going around, unfortunately. It's just, for me, very disappointing that MediaWorks actually decided to pick up and run with the story without doing a little bit of investigative work, when you consider that MP are right in the middle of sort of promoting their team, releasing their team, launching this franchise at the moment. And, you know, it painted a few people into a wee bit of a corner. And I know for a fact that some players who have been signed are asking questions at the moment. Hey guys, what's going on? So it's caused a bit of disharmony. But from what I understand, I did get a message. The New Zealand Rugby Football Union has pretty much got involved, lawyered up, and pretty much said to MediaWorks just to take all this down. So yeah, I think that really puts it all in perspective. Unfortunately, it's been a wee bit of a bushfire for MP at a time where they should be releasing players. It's interesting, in the last couple of days, we haven't seen any new players released. So I suspect there's a bit going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and look, Moana Pasifika are not let's be blunt here, that they're not a mature organisation. They don't necessarily have the full back office staff all fully necessarily in place yet, and definitely not in a kind of well-oiled machine that knows that communicates together. So it doesn't surprise me that, yeah, as you say, the brakes have been put on some of their announcements while they do some firefighting around that. Bo, you got any comments on this one, or should I take some more comments from the chat?
Well, no, I think Steve pretty much, wrapped it up very, very well. One thing I have to say is, be it sport, any industry, when you run an organization, it takes a lot of organizational structure and organizational discipline to actually be successful at what you do, particularly from a financial point of view. So you need to have all your nuts and bolts and people who are actually using the ratchet to have the right amount of so that you don't leave the nuts too loose, nor you tighten it too much, so that you can give everyone the right amount of freedom, so that you could create the right culture. Now, this takes real maturity, and being having been an entrepreneur all my life, I can tell you one thing: people tend to take the easier way out. So, from a leadership point of view, you always got to try and get them back in line. So I think was it Nocturnal on the chat? He was talking about that chairperson's interview. I think it was about Kanaloa and that whole sort of Simon, beg your pardon. Yeah. So look, all that's just unfortunate, and it's. I think I'd like to think we've all moved on from that, but with the advent of the internet, all this just keeps coming back. So hopefully, as far as Moana Pasifika goes, they can just stay really focused on what they have to do. And of course, first up, they have to make sure they do the basics right. So both on and off the field, because doing stuff on the field is just one part of the equation. A lot of stuff off the field, and that's why some of the franchises like the Crusaders have been very successful, is because they've got their off-field structure and strategy spot on. So, looking forward to real big and better, brighter things from Moana Pasifika. They certainly, have got some really good personnel, and I think let's just hope and see how all this unravels. And more than anything, I just like to see Moana Pasifika come out and express themselves both on and off the field.
Craig asks, does New Zealand Rugby Football Union own the license to Moana Pasifika? No, I think Moana Pasifika own their own license. But obviously it's granted by New Zealand Rugby, right? So New Zealand Rugby have sold it or granted it to Moana Pasifika. So the only thing I'm curious about this Moana Pasifika non-profit organisation. I'll be honest, I don't know what structure it is, but I can't see there being much profit in Super Rugby. Full stop. So whether it's a non-profit or a profit organisation, I can't see it actually making much money. To put bluntly, there isn't a lot of money to make in Super Rugby. Pretty much all the income, I believe, is pretty much spent.
Yeah, either way, hopefully the income, even if it's a couple of bucks, has to be more than your outgoings. Because if you don't, what tends to happen is you hemorrhage money, and the longer it prolongs, all of a sudden you find yourself in this precarious situation called bankruptcy. So whatever happens, be it profit, non-profit, if it's non-profit, you turn what you call a surplus. If you're a full-on business, you turn a profit and you pay tax on that profit. This is business economics 101. So hopefully, Moana Pasifika have got that sorted out, which I'm sure they have. And hopefully they can make tons of profit so that, we can get players who are well remunerated and there is an organization and structure in place. We can actually see the girth of Pacific Island talent go to, and they're actually having an outlet where they can come and show their wares.
Yep. So that's wrapping up, I think, most of the stuff. There's been, and I say I'm really disconnected from reality at the moment, folks. But I have seen a whole bunch of tweets about something about Northland and COVID levels and stuff. But folks, don't worry, the Northland team are in Rotorua already ahead of their game this tomorrow. So obviously you'd expect them to be there already. So I don't expect there to be any interruption to that game in Rotorua. I haven't filled in my COVID questionnaire, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be allowed to go to that game, but I will do that straight after this.
Paul, I should jump in, and we shouldn't forget the biggest local story, of course, the signing of former Irish coach Joe Schmidt, and of course the other signing, Craig McGrath as well. Now that is just huge news, which really came out of nowhere. I knew that Craig McGrath was joining the team as, I think, in a defensive capacity. Stand to be corrected there, Boa. So I knew he was joining, but who knew that Joe Schmidt was finally basically working his way back into New Zealand rugby. So what a wonderful fit for this Blues organisation. And it's been 14 years. Of course, he was with the Blues between 2004 and 2007. So 14 years later, back to the scene of the crime.
Look, and a cracking coaching addition there for the Blues. Look, and obviously masterminded the Ireland's first ever win over the All Blacks and did it again. Unfortunately, couldn't take Ireland beyond the quarterfinals at the Rugby World Cup, though, but did, I think, pick up a Grand Slam as a head coach. I'll have to go, I might be wrong there, but I think he did. So, yeah, look, a very, very good coach. And be a fantastic role for, fantastic addition to the Blues. Craig says he's reading Joe's book now, I think. So there we go. That's interesting to hear.
Joe Schmidt, I think
you're aware of?
This is the start of some wonderful things for New Zealand rugby. Joe Schmidt, a guy I have immense respect as a coach, most of his rugby IQ and his ability to inspire his troops and his coaching philosophy. Absolutely love it. He's what you call that empowering style of coach, and he sticks to the basics. And when he writes a game plan, boy, it's like reading an Alfred Hitchcock novel, but it's very clear, lots of clarity. And of course, I have to give a lot of big ups to Craig Ice McGrath, lovely guy. I know him really well. He spent some time with, obviously from Waitemata and the Melbourne Harlequins, and then he's been coaching in Japan, I think, with the Honda Heat. Lovely guy, very simple philosophy. And I think it was about a couple of years ago, I remember at a Blues Auckland NPC training session, I told him, I said, Craig, this is the start of some much bigger and better things to come. And he was very modest and he just completely dismissed it. And sure enough, he's now the Blues defensive man. So great acquisition, great news for the franchise. And particularly with Joe Schmidt coming in, maybe this is the beginning of something special moving forward. And I'm not going to say it, I'm just going to leave it at that.
I was going to say, next time you see him, you can say, "I told you so, Craig." That's the But I was also going to say, gee, one of Joe Schmidt, one of Northland's favourite sons, born in Kawakawa, 40 minutes north of Whangarei, many years ago. Even though he probably moved away when he was about a year old down to Woodville. I think we can claim him.
You claim anyone that's been sort of north of the Harbour Bridge for a day trip, if you can there. Oh dear. Looks like there's been some signings for around World Rugby around players and stuff, which I must say I've totally missed out on, folks. So I've been kind of busy over the last couple of days. But Boa and Stephen, thank you for dragging me onto the straight and narrow and filling in the massive gaps in my knowledge this weekend. It's been a pleasure as always. But Stephen, you're waving a finger around, which generally means you want to say something.
Yeah, just before we go, make or break game for the Northland Taniwha down in Rotorua tomorrow evening. I gather you're going to be there, Paul. In fact, it's an important game for both of these teams. Obviously, with the Steamers, their final competition game is against Canterbury down in Christchurch. So I think they'll probably want to get across the line in this particular game. Bit of bad news for Northland. They have lost basically two captains. Jordan Olsen, who's basically out, had to return home for birth of a second child. Tom Robinson took another head knock again, unfortunately. So just in terms of precaution, basically they decided not to play Tom, and I think that's the right idea. Carter Pryor also taking the head knock. So yeah, gonna be, would have been tough with a full strength team to beat Bay of Plenty, but I would suggest that's probably why Bay of Plenty are paying $1.17 and Northland are paying around about $4 for that game tomorrow. But just want to wish them all the luck on not quite the last game of the year, although they will be sending predominantly a B team down to play Hawke's Bay in their final game on Saturday. And yeah, last round of the NPC this weekend, or round robin round before we get into the finals.
Well, there might be a few players who have to go down to that Hawke's Bay game that weren't expecting to, if players are trapped in Northland. So we'll have to wait and see what side does travel down to play Hawke's Bay at the weekend. But thank you, guys. Stay safe, everybody. Follow the rules, get yourselves vaccinated, and let's get back to normal as soon as possible.